Okay, welcome everybody to a Turtle Survival Alliance webinar experience. My name is Jordan Gray, and I will be your moderator for today. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me okay. It's quite a rainy day here in the South. Luckily, there is a roof overhead. And what I want to do is I would like to begin by uh, giving you a little bit of housekeeping. So this is in a webinar format. So there is a question and answer function. If you have any questions that you have during the time of the webinar, please put them in the question and answer function. If you would like to speak to anybody that's also in the webinar, you can use the chat. That's a great place to be able to put information in to the chat. Just so everybody here knows who is joining, if you're not familiar with Turtle Survival Alliance, Turtle Survival Alliance has a mission where we see a planet where turtles thrive in the wild and are respected and protected by all humans. We have a vision to protect and restore wild populations of tortoises and freshwater turtles through science-based conservation, global leadership, and local stewardship. Um, we will be having a really exciting opportunity during our question and answer session of the webinar. We are going to be giving away a signed copy of Time and Turtles by Cy Montgomery and Matt Patterson, authors and artists who you may very well know. And the way to do that is once you stay, either ask a question during the Q&A period or type in Turtles Forever into the chat function. Those two options are your opportunities to be able to be entered in, and we will pick one participant at random to receive the signed copy of Time and Turtles. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you to all of our partners out there and our sponsors and donors, because without your support, we would not be able to do the conservation work that it takes to be able to save more than 100 different species from extinction. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Clinton Doak. Uh, Clinton is the operations manager at the Turtle Survival Center, and he is going to give you knowledge about the TSC and its history and what it means for turtle conservation. So with that said, Clint, take it away.
Thanks, Jordan, and welcome everybody virtually to the Turtle Survival Center. Back in 2013, the TSA started a massive endeavor to create what is now known as the Turtle Survival Center. We're sitting on 11 years of growth and information that we've gathered over that time. We started with a few hundred animals. Now we've grown to over 800 animals in our collection. And the purpose of the Turtle Survival Center falls right into all those highlights that Jordan had mentioned that the TSA likes to undertake. And this is mainly under that conservation initiative. And what we do is we focus on species that are falling through the cracks that really need help in their native ranges. So what we're doing is we're breeding those species and we're tracking genetics, and that hopefully in the future we can return them to the wild. Animals like the Rote Island Snake-neck and Cora Beretti are some of those perfect examples of animals that really need conservation initiatives to hopefully put them back in the wild someday. And that's really kind of what the whole purpose of the Turtle Survival Center was in the early days. Now we're expanding more to focus a lot on North American species, working with the SAFE program, and really starting to ramp up larger initiatives to really focus and impact turtles in North America, as well as what we've continued to do in Southeast Asia. With that being said, the Turtle Survival Center still has a long way to go. We have a lot of future development to take place, and we can't do it without the support of all of these people, these organizations, and you here on this webinar. So definitely stay tuned throughout the year, the rest of this year into next year, and help us in any way you can. We greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to AJ Fetterman, who is a keeper two here at the Turtle Survival Center. And he's going to show you all the fun hatchlings we have.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Clint. So we are coming live from our hatchling room here. So this is kind of the first place that our turtles will hang out and live for the first year or so of their lives. So to date, we've released we've hatched about 75 individuals from 12 to 13 different species. So we are going to kind of walk you through kind of a lot of those hatchlings that we have. So first up, we actually have a really cool species. This is Cicalia bealii, or Beale's eyed turtle. And I will actually be able to take one of these guys out. These guys are native to China, and they get their name from, they have kind of what look like fake eyes on the back of their head. And they are pretty useful for when they, to hopefully look like eyes so that, predators or things that might be trying to eat them can see their eyes. So if you were to stretch his head all the way out, you would see on the back there two kind of bright yellow eye spots. He's a little bit shy right now, so he's not coming out. These guys are, are young hatchling turtles. It's very normal for hatchling turtles to be very shy. In the wild, there's a lot of things that can eat hatchling turtles. So, the first year or so of their lives in the wild, they're just going to be kind of bunkered down and trying to stay as safe as possible. And so that's what we got here with this guy's just acting a little bit shy. But like I said, this is the Beale's eyed turtle. We've bred 6 so far this year. This guy here is a really pretty example of that. Oh, now he's starting to act out a little bit, which is great. Cool. And you can see we have them all in these individual housing situations. So every single turtle has its own tub with an individual identification number. And that way we can track, the genetics of the animal, the lineage of the animals, the parents of the animal. And that way we can, the mission of this facility is to propagate as many genetically diverse offspring and babies as possible. So when we house them all individually and have all the parents individual, you're really able to, continue that genetic diversity of the offspring for generations. Awesome. So next we're going to head right below it, and we're going to look at another really cool species. This is Leucocephalon yuanui, or the Sulawesi Forest Turtle. And so this is a really interesting turtle here. Actually, I should say 2 turtles. These guys were actually twins. And twins are kind of an interesting thing in turtles. A lot of the time, right, a female will lay more than 1 egg. And that, could be considered twins. Those are clutch mates is what we call them. So kind of similar to siblings, right? They're all, genetically distinct. But this guy right here, as well as this guy right next door, actually hatched out of the same egg. So there's 2 turtles in 1 egg, which as far as we know, that's, the first time that's happened at this facility, at least. And we haven't heard of that happening in this specific situation, where it was actually like a really, really elongated or really long egg. It kind of looked like a figure 8. And so we think it was, 2 egg follicles that were actually fused together, and both, were happy, healthy hatchlings, relatively similar size. So, we were worried, one might be out competing the other one in the egg or something like that. But, these guys are both thriving and doing really, really well. So believe it or not, this is, pretty close to the size they come out. These are pretty large hatchling turtles. The adults are, maybe 8 to 10 inches. And this is the, like I said, they have pretty large eggs, and especially this guy, right? The pair of turtles here was a very, very large egg. And we'll move over a couple enclosures right here, actually, and we can see this is the growth that we can get in about a year. So this animal was born in 2023. And if I compare it to one that was born a couple, maybe a month or so ago, there's obviously a really, really large size difference. And so, it's the best way to, guarantee the thriving and the success of an individual is to get it to grow and, quickly, but also not too quickly. So they can about triple in size in a year or so. And they, like I said, once it gets to be about the size of this year-old here, they're much, much better off, much, less likely to get sick, or, in the wild, they want to get as big as quick as possible too, right? Because we talked about how baby turtles are really, really likely to be predated, right? There's a lot of things that can eat a baby turtle. So if a turtle can get from that big to that big in a year, that's going to really, really help. Awesome. So we're going to move over to this next rack now. We're going to start up top here. We have a species called Cora mohati, or the keeled box turtle. So these guys here are really cool. They're a part of the Cora genus. It's the first Cora we're going to talk about today, but most of the individuals that we have here are Cora, and that's a genus of turtles. That means it's a group of species of turtles, and they're Asian box turtles, primarily from Southeastern Asia. So these guys are kind of interesting or unique for Cora. They get the name keeled box turtle because you can see they have these kind of keels that go back around their back there. And when they're adults, they almost have like a flat back. They almost have, let me see, he's waking up, and I kind of woke him up from now. They actually have almost a flat back. They really have a very interesting, very unique shaped shell. And so these guys are turtles, right? I always get the question, what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? And a good rule of thumb is that tortoises are usually terrestrial and turtles are usually aquatic. Cora are a little bit different. Cora are a little bit different, where they are turtles, right? They're a species it's a genus of turtles, but they are largely terrestrial, and they will spend a lot of time on land. So they can swim, or they can spend a decent amount of time in the water, but they are primarily terrestrial. We do raise them more aquatic than the adults. The adults live in pretty much a land enclosure, and you can see that bright yellow bottom of the shell there. A turtle shell is made up of two parts. We talked earlier about the carapace of the Cora mohati, or the keeled box turtle, how they have that really interesting shape. And the other part is called the plastron, and that is the belly of the turtle. And in this case, you can see how it's kind of bright yellow. And one other thing, if you look really, really closely, you can see kind of like how we have a belly button. When these guys are born, they have an umbilical, a yolk sac. And it's actually right there. And it's a big kind of sack of, nutrients. And it's, part of the yolk of the egg that they keep absorbing for a few days to a few weeks after they hatch. And it's not until after that is actually absorbed that they'll start to actually eat, and they'll start eating food that we offer them. So we've hatched out. These are the species that's currently hatching out. We actually have an egg pipped in our enclosure, or in our incubator right now. What pipped means is when you turtle just starts to break out of the egg, you'll just see a tiny little crack and then a tiny little hole, and slowly over the course of, but this species, it can go either really, really quickly, or sometimes it can take 2 or 3 days. And that is, how they hatch out. And a lot of the time, they'll actually be curled up in more like an egg shape than an actual turtle shape. And then over the course of 2-3 days, they'll slowly start to unfold, and their shells will harden up to that kind of normal turtle shell that we're used to. So like I said, these guys are actively hatching out. There's one pipped, one more egg still to hatch. So we've got plenty of room for them, but we do have, I believe, 12 in here right now. So all of these guys right here are all Cora mohati, and they're all the keeled box turtle, I should say, and they're all a little bit different. And you can see they all have their own individual enclosures. This system is really cool, where it's actually like an irrigation system that you would use for your lawn, and we have it to turn on a couple times a day, give them totally fresh water, and it's a pretty self-sustaining system. We do water changes on them every day, but they also, 3 or 4 times a day are getting very fresh, nice clean water. All right, awesome. So we are going to keep on moving down. And next up, we have a species that we have a lot of experience with here, and we have had quite a few hatchlings. This one here is the newest one, and it's actually very small. This is called the Cura galbinifrons, or the Indochinese Box Turtle. And if you look really, really closely at his face, if we can get it to focus, you can actually see that he has his little egg tooth still. He has that little bit on the end of his nose, and that's actually how they are able to break out of their egg. So that's what they use right there to do what I said earlier, pip, right? And that's how they break out of that shell, break out of the egg shell, I should say. And it can take a couple days. You know, it's not an easy task for a turtle to hatch. And sometimes we get, you know, even eggs of the same clutch, or the female laid the eggs at the same time, that hatch, you know, up to a week to 2 weeks apart. So it can be a really, really hard thing for them to do. But like I said, they typically take a day or two, pop out of the egg, and then we'll start eating a little bit later on. So there's a group of in the Cura genus, and that is, we call that the galbinifrons complex. It's a group of 3 species. And we have it's kind of our bread and butter here at the Turtle Survival Center. We have a lot of them. We breed a lot of them. We've produced a lot of them. And luckily enough, we actually had a pretty big milestone this year, as we hit our 100th Indochinese Box Turtle we've hatched. So we can actually slide on over and we can see that actual individual is this one here. So this guy right here, we're going to leave him in his closure, but this is the 100th hatchling of this species that we've produced here. So these guys are, they're critically endangered in the wild. These guys are really, really suffering. But we've been really fortunate that we were able to get a good amount of adults from the wild when they were either confiscated or rescued from markets. And we were able to get a nice breeding population here. So we've obviously now gotten more than 100. We're probably at 106 or so. But this year was a really big year for us, where we hit that milestone. It's really cool too to see, the individual variation in the hatchlings. You can see that guy and this guy look pretty different, right? They have different spots. There's some really dark ones as well, like we can see here. So there's a lot of variation in these, and it's just kind of there's just that as adults, these guys are really, really colorful. They have bright yellows and oranges and reds and really, really bright colors. So it's cool to see, a little bit of variation in the offspring as well. Cool. So like I said, there's kind of 3 related species, or 3 really closely related species. First one is the Indochinese Box Turtle. We're not going to see the third one, the Vietnamese Box Turtle, but we will see the Barrett's Box Turtle, or Cura barretti. So those are all of these up top here are part of the Barrett's Box Turtle. They look really, really similar to the galbinifrons. The easiest way to tell is, remember I said the plastron is the bottom of the shell. The plastron of these guys is different than the plastron of this. So I'll pick up this guy right here, and you see it's totally black, right? It's a totally black plastron. It looks like just a normal black shell. And then I will pick up one of these, and you see it's got a pattern there. So that's the easiest way to tell Cura barretti versus Cura galbinifrons. Otherwise, they look really similar. The Barrett's Box Turtle have usually a little more orange as well. Both of these are found in Southeastern Asia. So they are, again, not a native species here in South Carolina, but we've been really fortunate to be able to produce a lot of them. Most of these are actually housed, most of the adults, I should say, are housed outdoors year round. The only exception actually is the species we're currently looking at. These guys we actually bring in the winters because it's just a little bit too harsh for them here in South Carolina. Awesome. So we've kind of wrapped up with that. Again, we call it the galbinifrons complex, or the Cura the Indochinese Box Turtle, the Barrett's Box Turtle. Next, we can move on. Here we got to move down a little bit more. We have what's called the McCord's Box Turtle. So these are named after Bill McCord, and they are a pretty interesting species. We'll see if they can we can get anyone to climb or come out. These guys are pretty cool. They're really, really kind of spunky, and they have a ton of personality. They have kind of a woody looking shell. It's nice. It's really, really a pretty brown color, and they have a bright yellow head. And these guys as well are pretty terrestrial as adults. These guys are also, like I said, about most of the Kora. These guys are found in Southeastern Asia. This guy's giving us a nice show here. These are a favorite of a lot of the keepers here. They the people that care for these animals, they just have a lot of personality, and they are always happy and willing to take food, which when you're keeping a bunch of turtles, if you can have some that eat really easily, it's always makes things a little bit easier. Okay, very cool. So next we're going to move on to some really cool species and some really cool individuals, actually. First up, we're going to talk about Kora trifasciata, or the the striped box turtle. So that is this guy here. You can see on his back here, he's got kind of the faint 3 lines down the back. These guys are kind of dull. It's kind of hard to see. But these guys are obviously very, very orange, very, very pretty. And they are a much more aquatic species of Kora than a lot of the other ones that we saw. So these guys actually live primarily in the water. You can see their water levels much higher than the other. And that's because these guys come out and they're pretty much ready to go and start swimming. So we actually only have hatched out a few of these guys this year, but this guy's the only one over here. Awesome. All right, so then if we're going to go straight up, this guy, we don't like to showboat here. We don't like to talk about all the famous turtles and people that we know, but this guy here is a bit of a celebrity. This is what's called Hyosceme spinosa, or a spiny forest turtle. And for those of you guys who are members of the Turtle Survival Alliance and maybe have come out to see us at an event or something like that, you may have gotten a magazine. And every year we put out a publication. We put out the Turtle Survival magazine. And this guy here had the honors this past year of being on the cover, actually, of that magazine. So if you've gotten that magazine, or if you'd like to get that magazine, you'll see this guy right on the front. It's not hard to tell why we picked him, right? He's obviously a very, very pretty turtle. They get the name of the spiny forest turtle, right? Because obviously he kind of looks like a throwing star, right? He's very, very sharp, very, very spiky, and these spikes are very sharp. And not only that, he actually has them lining his carapace as well. And we've kind of talked about before, right? When a turtle is very, very small, very, very young, they're very likely to be predated or eaten by a predator, right? So if you were a predator of something like this, and you picked it up and put it in your mouth, and you felt spikes all over your mouth, you're obviously a lot less likely to eat that, right? And you're probably going to spit it out. So these guys have that really cool adaptation to at least help prevent them from being eaten by predators. And they do have a really, really pretty plastron. Remember, the bottom of the shell is called the plastron. And they have these really cool kind of stripes that go across in a really interesting pattern. One really notable thing, though, is as these guys grow, they will actually not only lose the spikes, they'll also lose the pattern. So it gets much, much duller. And when you see these guys as adults, they look like just kind of a normal smooth turtle. All of these spikes kind of grow out. And even since this guy was on the magazine cover, you can see they've grown out a little bit. But eventually they'll be, nice and smooth, and they so they kind of grow out of needing that adaptation. It's a really, really interesting thing. So like I said, this is a Hyosemys spinosa. It's in a different genus than all of these other turtles we've been talking, or most of the other turtles we've been talking about. But it is still found in Southeastern Asia, and a very, very interesting, like I said, sort of famous turtle. And you can see even the face is very pretty, right? They have that almost Darth Maul red and black looking coloration. All right, awesome. So we can put this guy back. And you can see, right, each turtle has its own hide. Each turtle has a little bit of fake plants. And that's just to help them feel as comfortable as possible, give them as naturalistic of an environment as possible. But also, in case they're, flip over or get stuck, the plants in the hide just make it much easier for them to kind of right themselves and get that figured out. Awesome. So this next one we're going to move on to is a really, really interesting species. A lot of people don't know that snake-necked turtle exists. Snake-necked turtles exist, I should say. But they do, and there's quite a few species of them. This is one that we work with very, very heavily. It's called the Chelidina mccordi, or the Rote Island Snake-necked Turtle. So these guys we've produced more than 3 this year, but we actually have like breeding loans with a lot of people. So we've distributed a lot of those offspring to different facilities and individuals. So these guys, you can tell they're very, very attentive, right? They're looking at us. And what they actually use this snake-like neck for, and I'll pull one of them out so we can see just how long this neck is. These guys are purely carnivorous turtles. So what they do is they're going to be swimming actually a lot like what he does right now, right? And he's going to be kind of sneaking up on on prey, I should say. Things like little fish, things like worms, little, macroinvertebrates. And what they're going to do is they're going to snap out their neck really, really fast. And it's kind of like a little, slingshot for their head. And they're able to catch prey that they otherwise, wouldn't be able to. So these guys have really, really pretty eyes. When they're babies, when they're a little bit younger, they actually have a much brighter plastron. They have reds and yellows and interesting things on their plastron. But as they get a little bit older, it starts to get dull. And you can see he's not used to being held like this. So he's a little bit, he has his head kind of tucked away right now. But as soon as I put him down in the water, you can see his neck is very long. And it's about the length of his shell, actually. So these guys are very, very food motivated. Every time we come in here, they think they're getting fed. So, right at he was all, tucked away with being out of the water. And then as soon as I put him down, he's ready for a meal. So these guys are pretty interesting. They're native to Australia, or I'm sorry, not Australia, Rote Island in Indonesia. A lot of these guys are found in Australia, not this species specifically, though. So yeah, like I said, these guys are found on Rote Island. They're actually only endemic to half of that island. So a lot of the time when you see a species that's endemic or only lives in one small area, they're really, really ripe to be extirpated or even go extinct. And what extirpated means is no longer native in that range. So when there's only a really small native range to begin with, it makes it really, really easy for them to be, pulled out by people for the pet trade or the bushmeat trade or things like that. It can just happen much, much quicker. And that's a good example of what's happened with this species. Awesome. Yeah, we have all of these individuals are from 2 breeding adults, or 2 breeding pairs, I should say. So we have a nice little population here of Rote Island snake-necks. All right, very cool. So the next species we're gonna work with is actually, I get a lot of flack for this, but it's actually my favorite species we work with here. A lot of people, they're kind of a little more dull or more bland color-wise than a lot of the ones we work with, but I really like them. And that is Pan's box turtle, or another Cora species, Cora pani. So these guys are, like I said, with a couple of the other coras, these guys are very aquatic. So there's a lot of variability in where the cora will live, but these guys are very much aquatic. They are kind of have a nice olive green color to them. These guys are found in China. They're very, very cool. There's actually one, I'm going to put this guy down and we're going to highlight one other individual. This guy's really interesting. Sometimes when hatchlings come out, right, there's just a little bit of things that don't quite happen right? I mean, we're breeding, close to 100 turtles every single year. So sometimes, genetically things don't always go right. And this guy's really interesting, whereas his plastron, or the bottom of his shell, actually didn't quite close up after his yolk sac was absorbed. So if you look really, really closely, I'm going to try and hold him still, but not stress him out too much. You can actually see his heart beating through through that hole in the plastron, and it's not open skin, or it's not open to his organs. There is a covering of tissue there, but it's not the hard keratin covered scutes that are normal of a shell. So this guy here is doing well. He's eating really well. He's actually eating maybe better than the rest of them. And it has gotten much smaller since he hatched out. So this is going to close up eventually, we hope. But it's really interesting that, sometimes things don't always go right, but when you have, hopefully we have, the resources to tackle those problems and save every turtle that we can, and help survive every turtle, keep every turtle alive that we can. Like I said, I don't know what it is about these guys, but they are personally my favorite of the Cora genus. Awesome. Very cool. So that is every turtle we have here in the hatchling, or every species that we have in the hatchling, I should say. This is kind of the fruit of all of our labor. We put a lot of work into breeding the adults, and this is the culmination of a lot of hard work. So I'm really excited that we got to share it with you. I know we have a Q&A coming up, and if anyone has any questions about any specific turtles, any specific species, I'd love to answer them. We can also go over actual things on the turtles. So I think I'll hand it off to the next person to kind of start the Q&A, but if you have any questions, just let me know.
All right, so thank you so much, AJ. That was fascinating. It's amazing to see all of these endangered and critically endangered species that the Turtle Survival Alliance produces at the Turtle Survival Center. And I know how much work the staff put into being able to manage and maintain these species such that they can provide offspring every year on a consistent basis, thereby growing the populations of these extremely imperiled species. So we do have a lot of questions. There's been questions coming into the Q&A. There's been questions coming into the chat. And by the way, as I have noted in the chat, this is the time to put Turtles Forever into the chat or ask a question in the Q&A so that you are eligible to win the signed copy of Time and Turtles by Cy Montgomery and Matt Patterson. So let me pull up, and I'm going to change our view to gallery. Please, Clint Doak, Chris Hagan, AJ, come back on the screen. We would love to have a panelist discussion for our Q&A. This is your opportunity for all of those interested in the species you've seen, even species maybe you haven't seen, to be able to ask the experts, learn about how they're cared for, learn certain specifics about the species. We have some very, very knowledgeable turtle nerds on board here, and we're happy to share our knowledge with you. So let me jump into the Q&A here, and let's go to our first question. Now, This one, oh, this is a great one. And it kind of goes into both questions. So there's first question is what do you feed these species that originate from different countries and how often? But the question right after that is do you have a preferred food or feeding regime for your hatchlings? So whoever might want to take that one away, whether it be Clint, you might want to jump into that one and be able to talk about the feeding regime for the hatchlings there.
Yeah, sure. And then, AJ, feel free to fill in since you do the bulk of the feeding. But essentially, all our hatchlings are insectivores. For the first year of their life, we rely very heavily on insect protein. And primarily, one of their first diets is red wigglers, or for the Chelidina McCordi, for example, it's blackworms or mosquito larvae. So we really focus heavy on invertebrate protein just because in the wild, that's most likely what they're eating. We do offer bulk vegetation, but they seem not to eat much of it at all in the first year. But after their first year of life, they'll switch more to an omnivorous diet where they're offered more salads. Um, and we typically do that for our hatchling room. All of the Cora specifically and other species in there are at least 5 days a week, whereas the Chelidina McCordi, the snake necks, are every day of the week and sometimes 2 times a day if need be. And AJ, if you have anything to add to that, please feel free to add on.
Yeah, all I'll really add to that is we always try and have as much variety as possible. So kind of an unofficial standard is something not, the same thing twice in a week. So we always, try and offer as much of a variety. He named a lot of the things that we'll offer, even some fish protein as well. And we always just try and mix it up. Variety is kind of the key. So we feed, like he said, most of the time 5 times a week, and ideally something unique each time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This question is going to be near and dear to Chris Hagen's heart. So, if you go around, if we saw the hatchlings there, you don't see shell deformities like pyramiding. You're not seeing those metabolic bone diseases like people experience sometimes with captive turtles. Uh, how do we maintain these turtles? And I know AJ went through it when he was going through there, but maybe you can give kind of I know it's might not be able to be a short synopsis on being able to maintain these animals such that they don't have things like shell pyramiding or other symptoms of metabolic bone disease.
So for a lot of these turtles that we're working with, these particular species, box turtles in general, it also applies to our native box turtles in North America as well. They need humidity when they're living in microhabitats in the wild, and they have a lot of humidity. They need that to not get malformed. So we maintain them in a fairly aquatic situation for the first couple of years of their life. As AJ mentioned, at 8 or 10 to 12 months, they move out of this room and do go into larger enclosures onto soil with plants and hides and all that kind of stuff. And then they have a regular water area to get into. But for this first year or two of their life, it's very important that they are kept very wet or very humid, one of the two, and that will prevent that curling of the shell and the malformation of the shell in general. Yes, there is some to do with diet. If you're only feeding them something that they shouldn't be eating, then they may get some deformity too. Sometimes they're hatch deformed and there's nothing you can do about that. But and generally speaking, if you keep them really moist and wet like this, they will not get deformed.
Great answer. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to throw this question over to AJ. Oh, since he's over there by the cubicles that the hatchlings are raised in, how long do they stay in those hatchling rearing environments, AJ? And then after they move out of those hatchling and rearing environments, where do they go?
Yeah, so typically 10 to 12 months is kind of the goal. These are all, for the most part, hatchlings from 2024. The only kind of exception to that is if there's one that's growing slower, or maybe we don't quite like the way that it's not quite going as food as aggressively as it should, something like that. because this room does get the most intense care, right? So we're in here every single day. Even if we're short-staffed, we're always in here every day. So this is the place where the animals are getting the most intense care. So that being said, 10 to 12 months, we do have a couple holdbacks from last year. And like I said, those are just the ones that aren't quite ready to graduate. After here, they will go to a building we actually have just finished in the last year, and that's called our ACE building, our Assurance Colony Expansion. And that is essentially an enormous building that functions really similar to this. There they'll be housed a little bit more terrestrial, and they also will be housed in groups. So each animal gets a pit tag, much like your dog or your cat would, just to make sure that it can always identify the exact individual. And they're housed in groups, and they can start really blowing up and growing from there, because they grow much, much quicker once we kind of get them out of this into a different setup.
Excellent. Thank you, AJ. So one of the things that we've brought up and Clint brought up about the Turtle Survival Center, it's an arc, and you have all these hatchlings that are being produced. In many cases, they're sent to other institutions so that they can start satellite colonies of their own of these species. But one of the main goals is hopefully someday in the future to get these hatchlings, or at least once they have been grown to a larger size, back into the wild. Chris, this might be another good one for you to take. Is, have we ever released any of these animals into the wild? Do we have plans to, and what would it take to be able to release these animals into the wild, to be able to bolster wild populations, or even return animals back on the landscape where they have been extirpated?
So the answer to the first question is no, we have not sent any of these back to be released into the wild. That is the plan, has always been the plan. It is not an easy thing to accomplish. There is a great deal of effort that goes into something like that people really don't understand. It's not, can't just put these animals in a box and ship them to China or Vietnam and they go back into the wild. That's not the way it works, unfortunately. It requires a lot of cooperation from governments and government entities in other countries, forestry departments, stuff like that. You also need people there on the ground to do the monitoring and the follow-up of those species. There are animals being bred within countries that the TSA works or has partnerships and programs in, where they are being released into the wild, but those are animals being bred in those countries of origin. There are no real international reintroductions going on right now. The Rote Island Snake-necked Turtle in Indonesia, that program is underway, but still there are complications from that. There, to some degree or another, with permittings and actually finding a safe place to put them. And so none have actually been released into the wild yet that I'm aware of. So it's underway. It's the plan. It's getting it all worked out to make it happen. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape behind it to do something like that. Lots of permitting involved that takes months and months, if not years, to make happen. So it is definitely our dream to do these things, to augment these populations or to totally reintroduce populations, but that's down the road still.
Thank you, Chris. Clint, as the operations manager, I think this would be a good one for you to be able to answer, is talking about quarantine and disease control, because we have such endangered animals on site. What are the methods to be able to prevent pathogen exchange between animals that you undertake there at the Turtle Survival Center?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. And AJ there has showed us the first response that we do, and that's either gloved or washed hands between every individual, specifically in that hatchling room. And that is a huge factor for preventing disease transmission. And another thing we do is everything we do at the center, we do in a specific order. And that is, again, to prevent disease transmission. We always start in that hatchling room. It is our cleanest, most secure room besides a quarantine room. And essentially it is. Nothing gets brought in there, biological matter, anything like that stays out of that room. If we do not hatch that animal, say one comes on a loan return or from one of our partner, and it's part of our genetic banking for breeding these animals, if we didn't hatch it, it does not go in that room. Those are purely Turtle Survival Center hatchlings. And that is another safeguard, just because even if you test animals, which every animal that comes to the Turtle Survival Center gets tested for diseases, but certain diseases have to shed to be testable. So just to mitigate that risk, if it's not hatched here, it does not go in that room. That being said, every animal that comes on site from other institutions, or if it started here and went, for example, we have a program with Tennessee Aquarium, where our hatchlings go to their beautiful turtle world. And then they come back after a year or two. They will re-go through a quarantine just because they've left the grounds. So quarantine is typically 60 to 90 days with more disease screening, fecals, anything you can do to mitigate a risk of transmitting diseases. And with that, our food, all of our substrate, everything, if it's in an enclosure and we need to put a different turtle in that enclosure, everything gets stripped, gets sanitized. All our dishes we use for cleaning have a multi-step sanitation where they're washed, they're disinfected with chlorine dioxide. That's our disinfectant of choice. And then they're UV baked for a minimum of 24 hours. So we take quarantine procedures and disease transmission very seriously here, just because these animals are so rare. And we do hope to put them back into the wild. We don't want to introduce a disease to them that someday, if they go back to China and Vietnam, where most of our species are based, we're not introducing something back into the wild in 50, 100 years when these animals can go back.
Excellent answer, Clint. So I'm going to throw the next one over to AJ there in the hatchling room. A number of people have noticed that these hatchlings, and this kind of goes back into some what Chris talked about, that these hatchlings don't have heat lamps on them, but there are other types of lighting. How do the animals thermoregulate, and what type of lighting is offered to them to be able to have both lighting and temperatures so that they can properly thermoregulate, have proper metabolisms, and of course be able to receive beneficial ultraviolet needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can probably tell from my forehead, it's very warm in this room. So we find it a lot more efficient to actually heat the room rather than the individual specific enclosures. That being said, there are other needs from lighting than just heat. So every single individual has ultraviolet rays over it. We are very generously given ultraviolet lights by ZoomEd every year, and so every year these guys are the lights are tested, make sure that they're outputting the correct amount of ultraviolet radiation and or lighting, I should say, and that it's really, really essential for these guys to grow properly. We talk about the diet, but diet and lighting kind of are two halves of the same coin to get a happy, healthy turtle. So yeah, this is, like I said, the temperature of the room is kind of consistent. These guys are all from relatively similar climates, so we can just kind of keep the room maintained at a certain temperature. But the actual, every single turtle has access to that ultraviolet light.
Oh, it looks like yeah, AJ, we might have to put this into your job description. Tony says, I'm not aware of a TSA YouTube channel. Tony, we do have one. I would love to see a weekly video of the activity and growth and just kind of routine stuff. Is that something that you all have talked about and might have interest in there at the Turtle Survival Center for not only all those attending the webinar, but the thousands and honestly, I think billions of people across the world that would be interested in keeping up with our hatchlings?
To do that, well, we'll definitely need more funding to hire a staff member to do that. You know, we're a 61-acre facility, and we're maintained with just 8 staff members trying to keep everything up and running. That includes our facilities, husbandry, you know, the management of everything. So that is a large undertaking that we would love to do. Just need more funding from folks like you here at the webinar to help us out to make stuff like that a reality. Being a 501c3 nonprofit, we really depend on our partners and people like you to make things happen. And that's why we're the Turtle Survival Alliance. We are an alliance of people and organizations to stop turtles from going extinct in the 21st century.
Excellent. Thanks, Clint. I know Chris Hagan has been answering some questions in the Q&A, so thank you very much, Chris. And so I'm going to bring this one up because it's been asked in a couple different ways. Jim Harding probably has the most kind of in-depth question here. So Jim says, you're successful at breeding these rare species. So it seems, and we touched on this a little bit before, it seems like you might have more adults at some point than you have room for. So if they're unable to currently go back to the wild, how do you manage these collections as far as these quote unquote surplus turtles, or turtles that we have dreams of them going back into the wild at some point, but as you said in your answer to the other question, it's just not feasible for them to go back into the wild at this point for their own safety?
Well, we continue to build enclosures here. We have a collection plan, a development plan. We have target populations to maintain each one of these species at a level of genetic diversity over the next 100+ years. So we still have a lot of building and growing to do here, where we will eventually maintain, you know, a couple thousand or more turtles of each of these, or not individual, in total of all of these species. We also have a large network of zoos and aquariums and universities and private individuals in the United States that we work with, and have a loan program. So yeah, we can't keep every turtle here, but also there's not a lot of room a lot of places. So we have the land here. We have to build out, you know, lots of enclosures, both individual enclosures for individual turtles, as well as group rearing enclosures outdoors for certain species that we have for, say, Cora galbinifrons, for instance, which would give us opportunities for behavioral studies, things like that. To have them in larger outdoor enclosures. We maintain all the adults individually, and they are only put together for breeding encounters in the fall and in the spring. And that is so we can monitor their health easily, so they're not beating each other up in their enclosures, because individual enclosures are usually smaller. They're not, you know, half an acre in size. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it. There's not a lot of space in captivity for, you know, a lot of turtles, so we have to be careful. In some cases, you know, you hate to do it, but there are species that, you know, you just can't hatch a lot of because there's no outlet for them, and you have to be careful about how many you hatch.
Great, thank you, Chris. I have a question I want to ask. So, you know, Chris, Clint, you all have been there for a long time now with the Turtle Survival Center, and of course, it having opened its doors in 2013. AJ is now well into his tenure there. What is your most memorable hatching event there for each of you at the center? You all have seen a lot of turtles hatch, and you work with these animals every single day, but is there something that just sticks out to you, a moment that sticks out, a species hatching that sticks out for each of you? I'd love to hear about that. I'm sure the viewers would as well.
Who wants to go first?
Can start if you want. For me, it's twofold, and it was two notable hatchlings of species that we had never hatched before. And the first was Cora pictorata. And that one we had been trying to hatch. And I was a keeper at the time here at the center, and I was doing water changes in their enclosure. And they were at that point, because they're one of our more tropical species, they were living outside in the summer and indoors in the winter. And they were in their indoor enclosures, and I had lifted the water bowl, and there was a hatchling this big. A species we'd never hatched before. We've been trying. We missed that egg. It hatched in the enclosure. That was in 2017, and since then we have hatched many Cora pictorata, which is fantastic, with a record of being 9 in 1 year, which, as far as we know, at least in the United States, nobody's ever hatched that many Cora pictorata. And the other was Leucocephalon uwanawai, a species near and dear to Chris Hagen's heart. And we were actually, trying to figure out why we couldn't get these animals to breed. This references a question that I saw earlier. We've used multiple different methods over long periods of time to figure out how to breed some of these species consistently. And for example, for Leucocephalon uwanawai, we were trying a hormone study to see if seeding male water into females or females water into males would help stimulate breeding. Because they are in a very aggressive species when they breed, and typically the female will present when she's ready. If not, you just separate the animals. But anyways, we were conducting the study, and I was moving over to an enclosure to seed the water, and happened to look down, and there was a hatchling swimming in the tub. Again, never found the egg, didn't know that the female was gravid, and there was our first uwanawai baby swimming around in the tub.
That's awesome. Thanks, Clint. AJ, what do you have?
All right. So for me personally, it would probably just be, I've been here for just shy of 2 years now. And it would probably be the first species that I saw hatch. And that would be the Chelidina mccordi. So these guys were actually the first eggs that I was able to find as an employee here, and also the first hatchlings that we have when I was an employee here. So these guys are really interesting. One of our females has clutches of, a couple dozen eggs. So there's a ton of eggs at a time. So it was just a very surreal experience for me obviously a very interesting, very unique, very charismatic, and kind of a flagship species for the Turtle Survival Alliance. So to be able to be a part of not only finding those eggs, but also those eggs hatching, it was a pretty cool experience for me to be a part of.
Nice. Thanks, AJ. Chris, been there a long time, seen a lot of turtles.
Yeah, I have to go back to Clint's second one, because it took me 18 years to see that hatchling. I probably had more Leucocephalon uwanawai eggs in my hands than any other human on this planet. I would bet, having them keeping them for almost 27 years now, and I've been getting eggs since 2000. And I didn't see my first hatchling until 2018. So that was a long time coming. If I had hatched Notocheles, I would probably say that one, but that never happened, unfortunately.
It's a good one. All right, so we have about a minute left. There's still so many questions coming in, really great questions. I just put in the chat that if anybody would like to ask more questions after the webinar, I just put in Clint, AJ, and Chris's email addresses. And feel free, if you have a question that you're not sure which one might be able to answer, you could send an email to all of them, and we'll try to be able to answer that for you. Something that I want to ask that has been asked also by many other people is, opportunities for learning. We've been here in a 1 hour webinar. People got to see the hatchlings. Are there opportunities to work with the hatchlings? One, and then two, what about just deep diving into turtledom and turtle conservation? What opportunity does the Turtle Survival Alliance offer for that at the Turtle Survival Center?
Yeah, so there's 3 main avenues you can take for that. The very first one being volunteering. If you're, local or semi-local, or if you just want to plan a trip and come out and volunteer with us, you can contact me. My email, like Jordan said, is in the thread, and we'll get you out to volunteer and get hands-on with the species here. Along with that is our internship program. This year is our 7th year running the program. We've had almost 30 interns in that 7 years, so it's quite an extensive program. So anybody over the age of 18 is more than welcome to apply for that starting in December. We're a little behind the 8 ball. We're about to do a accreditation for the AZA to keep us in a related facility standing. And on top of that, for anybody really wanting that in-depth, in-your-face dive, we have what we affectionately call Turtle School. It is a week-long course that is everyday turtles, 12 hours a day here at the Turtle Survival Center. So you would stay locally at one of the Black's Fish Camp, which is a local establishment, and it is all turtles all day, hosted by the Turtle Survival Alliance and the Taxon Advisory Group. And that is spearheaded by the Turtle Survival Center staff. So you'll see presentations from all of us, as well as professionals from around the world, if they can make it in. But that includes veterinary care and husbandry and facilities, and everything guided towards a turtle is in that course. So if that's something you're interested in, you can reach out to Chris Hagan for more information for that. And otherwise, yeah, it's volunteering, or if you can't make it here, check out TSA's North American Freshwater Turtle Research Group, specifically in Florida. There's a lot of spring surveys you can do there, and it's all volunteer science based.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. And so for the internship applications, when will people be able to start applying for the spring?
Yeah, we're hoping to have that open by the end of the year, ideally December. But with this, like I said, with this accreditation inspection coming up, that's occupying most of our time. But that being said, it's a pretty simple application form. Send me a cover letter and a resume, and just look to do that in December roughly, and then we'll just start interviewing and hopefully getting something lined up shortly by the end of January into February. That way we can start getting people out here in the summer.
Great. And just in case anybody wants to learn more about the course out at the Turtle Survival Center next September, just put it into the chat of where you can get the PDF to learn about it, and tug on a friend, tug on the sleeve of your boss, whoever, and say, hey, I want to go to this. So I want to end this on a really positive note. I mean, the whole thing I think has been positive. This has been awesome just to see the hatchlings, learn from the experts. Is that, this takes a whole, to be very cliche, a whole village. We have so many supporters, donors, and sponsors of the Turtle Survival Center throughout the years that have been able to develop this arc and maintain this arc. And the visions for the future of the Turtle Survival Center are incredible. So again, all of you joining today, all of you who are TSA members, who are TSA donors, like, it takes everybody to be able to do this work. So, no matter what kind of support you're able to give, you're supporting turtle conservation, you're supporting turtle preservation, and you're giving species who are on the brink of extinction a shot at a future on this planet. If it weren't for all of us, I mean, every person out there who loves turtles and who spreads the message of turtle conservation and awareness, these animals would just have no chance on Earth. As you all know, they're extremely imperiled. So I want to thank everybody who's joined today, everybody who might watch this recording later on, and everybody out there who's given even just a little bit of their time to be able to appreciate and turtles, spread the messaging around turtles and their conservation, and in avenues like this, join together, ask questions, have friendly conversations in the chat, and you know, just love turtles. So thank you all very much for joining us. You will be receiving an email tomorrow that has the link to the recording of this webinar if you'd like to check back, especially with all those great questions that have been asked. And again, if you have questions that didn't get answered and would like to email us, you have Clint, AJ, and Clint's emails in the chat. Please feel free to copy those, or even just go to our website and email info@turtlesurvival, and Bella will be able to send out that email to the most appropriate person to ask. So again, thank you all very much. Turtles forever, and we hope to do this again. And when we do, we'll see you there. So take care. Turtle on.